Parshat Chukat, יהי רצון שהלימוד יהיה לרפואת כל החולים, ובתוכם טניה בת הודה מרגלית, יוסף, יאיר בן אבי וחווה, הרב סיוון בן סימה, בתוך כל שאר חולי ישראל. Parshat Chukat is a parsha of transitions. One of the main transitions is that we transition from the beginning of the desert to the final year of traveling through the desert. And one of the last wars that we fight before we enter into the land of Israel is a war that has two parts to it, and that they always come together. A war against Sichon Melech Og, Sichon Melech Heshbon, and like we see in Sefer Dvarim Pasuk Daled, Achea Koto et Sichon Melech HaEmori Asher Yoshev Becheshbon ve'et Og Melech HaBashan Asher Yoshev Be'ashtarot Ba'edrei. And there are three questions about this war. The first question is, who cares? Why is this war needed for us to be known historically? We know that the Sefer of Tanakh is not a historical book, but an educational book. And if it's an educational book, what's described is a message. And so if that is the context of Tanakh, then what is the message of the war of Sichon and Og? But the second question, if we look back in the Pasuk, is that they make sure that you know exactly where they're from. Sichon Melech HaEmori. So I know that Sichon is the king of a nation called Emori. But he makes sure that you know where this king lives. Asher Yoshev Becheshbon. And seen to in the next Vet Og Melech HaBashan. So I know that Og is the king of a nation that lives in Bashan. But they tell you where the king lives. Asher Yoshev Be'ashtarot Be'adrei. So the second question is, why is it important for us to know where the kings live? And the third question is that throughout all of Tanakh, these two wars are always linked together. In Parshat Chukat, when they come for the first time, they describe them similarly in the same Parshia, one after the other. In Sefer Dvarim, when we enter into Israel, they're described together. In Sefer Tehillim, Parakuf Kavav, there again, when they describe this war, they're described and linked together. The three questions about the war of Sichon and Og are, why is this a message for the future? Why is it important to know where they lived? And why are they always linked together? And so the Sfat Emet, in the year 1875, on this war, he says, Piresh Adoni Aviz Keni Mori V'Rabbi Zichrono Livracha. So says this father, many heard this from his grandfather. Shenikveu Lidorot. There was something about these two nations that was needed to be established as a message for the future. And so he says that the places that they are the first is Cheshbon. And he says the idea of Cheshbon is from the word of Machshava. Why did the Torah describe where this king was? Because the word Cheshbon is from the word Machshava, which means thought. The idea of Melech, of the Og Melech HaBashan, the Sichon Melech Amori Asher Yoshev B'Cheshbon, is that he fought against the thought. But the next king, Og Melech HaBashan, Yoshev Be'edrei, says the Sfat Emet B'divrei Edrei is a word which describes koach. It's the word which describes the zroa, which is the arm, and therefore the strength. And so says the Sfat Emet, why is it significant to know where they're coming from? The first king of Sichon, he fights against the Machshava, and that's why he lives in Cheshbon. And the second king, Og, who lives in a place called Edrei, which is the arm and therefore the strength. And so the first war that we fight are a war against Machshava and a war of strength, and they are linked together, and Machshava comes before strength and Maseh. And so in these two wars are a summary of why and how people will fight against the people of Am Yisrael. They'll always begin from fighting against the Machshava. And that was the first war of Sichon. Sichon was a war that was fighting against the thought. And then the next war is Og fighting against the Ma'aseh. And we know in Kabbalat Shabbat we say Sof Ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. And we realize that in every action there's a thought. And so these two kings are linked together because every Maaseh begins with a machshava. And the first war is a war fighting against the idea, and then you can fight against the action and the practice. Why is this war a message for the future of the people of Am Yisrael? And the idea is that we are not a nation that acts. We're a nation that our actions are a bridge from what we are dreaming and thinking. There are many people that think, there are many people that do. But our war is to realize that what we do is actually the real concept of what we think. We do not disconnect machshava from maaseh. It's not that you can be a thinker or an actor. You can't just decide that you're going to love the idea or you're going to love the action. You have to realize that the action is the formation of the idea. And therefore what you do is actually what you dream. And often we think that these two are separated, that we could dream A and do B. But the last war before we enter into the land of Israel with Sichon and Og are a war that are not only teaching what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for. We're fighting to be people that our actions are proof of our ideas and our dreams. And if we look in the history of the Jewish people, one of the characters that stands out most for many of us is a person by the name of Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. And Rav Kook when he entered into the land of Israel, he said an amazing sentence. He said that the Torah learned in the land of Israel has to be affected by the land and transformed through the land. Rav Kook was saying that the land of Eretz Israel is a place of action that before that had a lot of thought, anticipation, and dreams. And that the idea of the actions that we do in the land of Eretz Israel are what we realize is the actualization of the dream. It might not feel as special. It's much easier to dream. To do is much harder. But actually what we believe is that anyone who disconnects between machshava and maaseh, anyone who can disconnect sichon and og, doesn't understand the real war. They want us to not really feel that what we're doing is what we're dreaming. But in essence, the land of Eretz Yisrael is the land which defines what you do. And before the land we had the Midbar. The Midbar was a place of machshava and dreams. And Eretz Yisrael was not an exchange program for machshava, but what it really means to lachshov. And our bracha to all of us entering into Shabbat Chukat and into those last moments before the Jewish people enter into the land of Israel is that we can realize that what we're doing is proof of what we're dreaming. If we want to be great husbands or great wives, it's not about how many times you say, I love you. It's how many times your actions are a proof of your love. We should be zoched that our masim are linked to our machshava, and therefore we believe in our masim as the experience of the real dream. Shabbat Shalom.